Good morning, and welcome to the second day of the second edition of the Eurafrican Forum. Yesterday was packed, I know. There was a lot to digest from yesterday's discussions, panel discussions, keynotes, conversation between presidents and all that. Today we have two panel discussions and a keynote speaker. I hope you also enjoyed the rooftop party yesterday. Please remember the hashtags, hashtag Eurafrican Forum, hashtag Partnership for Equals. When I was scrolling through the pictures yesterday on Instagram, I was like, if I hadn't been there, I would have liked to be there because, everyone seemed very happy, smiling with their champagne and ice cream from Philippe de Botton. Like yesterday, there's just a couple of practical things. This is all live streaming on the Eurafrican Forum YouTube channel. And it's also possible to rewind and watch everything that happened yesterday, and same goes for today's sessions. Now we have a big first panel. And please use the app. If you have any questions, short and to the point, write them, and the moderator will try and get them into the discussion. And you can also use the app to rate every speaker, all the sessions, and all that, which is a great tool for us to then improve things for the third edition. I think I will have no further ado, but introduce the first panel, which is Africa, the new frontier for impact, investment, and innovation. A key thing of what the African Forum is all about. And let's start with the introduction video.
Harnessing the power of entrepreneurship, innovation, and capital for public good. Impact investment is the invisible heart of markets. Nations need to grow, need to invest, allowing the best social innovations to shift the paradigm and tackle social and environmental issues of the 21st century. Impact-driven organizations, entrepreneurs, foundations and philanthropists, investors, businesses and governments, developed countries alike, Europe and Africa, together, leading impact investment.
Now I'd like to invite the panelists on stage. Christel Kupa, founder and CEO of Oceano Capital from Congo and Belgium. Eric Young, Africa CEO of Green Tech Capital Partners, Germany and Cameroon. Maria Angeles Leon Lopez, co-founder of Open Value Foundation from Spain. Kim Krijlgaard, head of Lisbon office of the European Investment Bank from Luxembourg and Portugal. Wena Ariel Awansu, CEO of Kia Medicals from Benin, and our moderator that will lead the discussion and have everything in his hands. He started the day yesterday as well with panel one. He's here again, Mr. John Gapper, the associate editor of the Financial Times in the United Kingdom. And I repeat, you can send any questions, you just write them. Mr. Gapper will see them and try and make them a part of the discussion. Mr. Gapper, over to you.
Thank you, Dora. And congratulations to everyone here for not only going to the sunset party, but turning up for the first session. And today, I think we're going to have an opportunity to dig a bit deeper, to dive into a really fascinating subject, impact investing in Africa. We're not going to be rushed. And since no presidents will be entering the room, you won't have to stand up for us, although you can if you want. So I'd like to start the discussion by just taking a couple of snapshots of what impact investing really means. And I'm going to ask both Eric and Maria just to explain to us how they invest and what they're investing in, and just give us a picture in a couple of minutes of what it means on the ground. So Eric, I'll start with Eric. Just explain to us what Green Tech Capital does and what impact investing is, the way that you pursue it.
Okay. So, hello everybody. So my name is Eric Young, and I would like first to thank you for having me here. Green Tech Capital is the premier investment company in Germany for African startup. We are very interested in companies that are addressing local problems. We believe that the change should come by people who knows about the ground and they understand what is needed. And this is also the source of our understanding of impact. They are able to drive changes, and our organization is providing them venture building. So we are the first entity who's doing venture building to give them an operational support. One, that venture building is successful and those companies are de-risk and have good basis to grow and increase their impact in different companies. We have an investment fund that will do follow-up investment in 2 tranches, 100 to $500,000, and then $500,000 to $5 million. For us, the impact investment is basically the positive changes that can occur at the level of the populations. We want to go beyond the statistic and see how it impacts lives, and that's what for us is important. We have in our portfolio a minimum of 75% of the companies that have to be impact-oriented, but we are above that criteria, but for us it's the minimum.
And who decides what impact investing is? How does it qualify as an impact investment as opposed to just an investment? Because from outside, I think a lot of people would say, well, almost any investment in an African country is going to be an impact investment.
Well, I think that first we use different experts to identify what impact investment is, but in our context, we'd like to connect the changes and the positive changes to the national interests of the countries and the populations. That's why we have an understanding of impact investment that can be sometimes more broader. We also believe that we want to make one step further because there was always this understanding that impact investment also means small returns because the greater goods has to take over the returns. But we believe that as of today, impact investment has to include better profit to make it more sustainable, and also give the possibility to the people that are initiating this impact investment project the capacity to become independent and also inspire others to follow that social good in terms of initiative and intention in the base of their business and included very early in their business model.
Okay. Maria, so you run the family foundation, the Open Value Foundation, which started in philanthropy and I think has moved into impact investment. Just explain why you made that move and where on the ground you're doing it and how you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, we start with philanthropy, and we've been doing that for more than 10 years. And we realized that the projects we were helping were always the same every year, same children, same moms, same hospitals. So we decided to change what we were doing. Something was wrong because the impact was not there. And then it was then when we discovered the microfinance environment and then the patient capital or impact investing, and we started to do it. The best definition I've ever heard about impact investing was from the former World Bank president, and he said, let's use the tools we have to make the rich people richer to take poor people out of poverty. And that rings the bell on me, and I think that this is the way we have to do it. So impact investment is exactly this. Invest in people that have less opportunities and hope that they will do it same as we do. Another thing I realized through 20 years between philanthropy and impact investing is that talent is not related with postcode. So there is talent everywhere. And for me, at the very beginning, it was a big surprise because I used to be paternalistic with my beneficiaries, thinking I'm the one that knows what they should do. But with investments, it's different. It is really, at the very beginning, we were like protecting, and now we are working together like equals, like they say in the Eurafrican Forum. So I think it's so good.
Okay, Christelle, actually, we'll take another snapshot of somebody. Now, you've come from a finance background, City of London, large-scale, sophisticated financial instruments. What made you decide to switch from that to Oceana Capital, small, targeted?
Yes. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me today. Pleasure to be here and to be part of this amazing event. I'm a product. I'm a diaspora myself, obviously born and raised in Belgium, with my parents originally from the DRC, been living now 20 years in London. As you rightly say, been in investment banking, very dry, competitive environment, and decided that this was not for me. I wanted to do a switch into Africa and wanted to use the skills that I've learned hardcore in those big banks and trying to apply them in this development finance in which I am. So Oceana Capital was born 2 years ago, 6 months after my own daughter, and decided that wanted to bring the skills that I've learned into this environment for the continent. The reason why, and I think we all can participate into that, was really to be the bridge. And I've been lucky enough to, live in, here in Europe and, around the world, was to be the bridge between European capital and African projects and products. In terms of impact investment, it can sometimes be a bit of a buzzword, and a lot of people think that just impact is doing good, but yes, but at the same time, it's a calculated way to participate into this development. So the investor that we are facing into this project is really to give them first a very strong commercial return, because they always perceive Africa as being highly risky. Well, I live in the UK, and I think with Brexit, we all understand that it's as risky as certain countries in Africa, to be totally frank. But to say the least, so high commercial return that we're providing to our investors, but also being able to calculate a social return. And when we say calculating a social return, is be able to report back to our investors what and how they've participated into those economy and into the project and product we've been presenting to them. So there's and I think we go into the details a little bit later into that, but we give, kind of a dual return to a client. And this is what impact investment for Oceana Capital is.
And just give us an example maybe of the sort of businesses that you're looking at to invest in. What are they doing?
Exactly.
Which industries are they in?
Yes, so at Oceana Capital, we are also taking the view with the Sustainable Development Goal, and I'm not sure if everyone knows in the room what they are, but they are goals that has been set up by the UN to really help and advance the economy. And there are 17 of them. I'm not going to enumerate all of them, But we at Oceano Capital, we are trying to really concentrate on the two goals that are dear to us. The first one is Sustainable Development Goal number 2, and that's equate with agriculture. So we are really much involved into agriculture, the full value chain. It can be from primary farming to agro-processing. And then the second pillar of Oceano Capital is the Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is the women economic empowerment. And we really are trying to marry both because we really strongly believe in women. Women, without women in Africa and in the world, really, it's a tough life. And we all know that. So women are very strong. Women is needed in business. Women sometimes don't have the voice, don't have the possibility to participate into economies, but we really should encourage them to be there. So those are the two pillars that we're looking. And to give you a very practical example, we have one of our portfolio company. It's a rice primary project based in the Côte d'Ivoire. And so primary business, for local consumption. We are supporting a local entrepreneur, and with the advice that we're giving them, we also are able to encourage him to really hire more women, but not only on the ground, but also in the company, in the structure, at the board level. And funny enough, he came to us a little bit less than a year ago for ask of $500,000. This was his idea, wanted to raise $500,000 to carry on and to progress into his endeavor. And with all the advice and making sure that we talk to the right individual, we were able to secure it's about to sign, but kind of a $4 million investment. So he came with a very small ask, and we've been able to extrapolate and see what can be done, and also knowing where the capital is, because, well, this is what we're there for.
Okay, great. And you said that you believe strongly in women entrepreneurs, and we happen to have one of them here. Vena, just tell us, you're the sort of entrepreneur that impact investors, I trust, are looking to invest in. Tell us what you are doing in Benin and what the idea of the business is and how it's impacting the local community.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I'm Ariela Wansou. I'm a medical doctor, basically, but not the kind of medical doctor taking care of the patient in hospitals. But I chose another adventure, but yet helping patients as well. So my story started 3 years ago when I was still in medical school. I was in the 6th year, and this day I was on duty when I received one of the patients coming from another hospital. So the lady just gave birth to a twins in these hospitals, but unfortunately she got on blood hemorrhage through the delivery. So she lost a lot of blood, and she needed to receive a blood transfer in an emergency because she was unconscious. And for a lady who just gave birth, the first exam that we can have on close should be the blood type, because the blood type is one of the first exams that we use to ask pregnant women. And for this lady who just gave birth, there was no way to access this information, even though she already had 3 babies in the past. So in this situation, she was supposed to have at least 1 blood type at disposal, but no way to access the information. So we had to waste the time to give her another blood type in order to go quickly into the blood transfer process. This process took us about 15 minutes. 15 minutes after that, we got the blood type, but this was too late, and this woman died. She died in a situation not because people were not there, people were not qualified to take care of her, but just because the information was not existent. And as this lady, a lot of patients die in the same situation because hospitals in most African countries are not connected. When the patient goes to the generalist, he goes to the specialist, there is no way to claim back the medical history. And that leads to a lot of waste of time for the doctor, a lot of waste of money. And that is why, instead of becoming just a doctor and taking care of the patient, I said myself, why not change this system and help to improve the process through where patients have the healthcare. And that is why we created 3 years ago Kia Medicals. And the objective is to interconnect hospitals on one platform in order to ensure that a patient going from one hospital to another can still have the same medical history, the same medical ID. So what we developed is a universal medical ID, which allows the patient to have his own medical record linked to a QR code that he can put on his phone, on his watch. The idea behind is to help him whenever he goes to have the same ID. And with this QR code, doctors connected to our platform can just scan the QR code and access very quickly the whole medical history. And the main challenges there that we are addressing is to allow patients to have less expenses in terms of healthcare services, because when the doctor is able to access very quickly the patient's medical history, he can know exactly what's going wrong with this patient. He can take action very quickly, and that helps to reduce the healthcare services cost. And at the other hand, patient spending less time in hospital because doctor is able to give him a very quick care, can be more efficient at work. He can spend less time at hospitals, and at the end, in terms of expenses, in terms of expensive, he can have less expensive in terms of health. So that is what we are doing in Benin now. And at this moment, we started in Benin, but we had a very great return in terms of interest from the health workers, interest from patients. And other countries started to ask for this solution, especially in Ivory Coast, where we started to have some clients, some interest, in Gabon as well. But the main goal for us is to create a kind of digital health ecosystem that can help to reduce the barrier that are on the file, avoiding patients to access easily to healthcare services.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's a very, very affecting example of impact investment and what the impact that proper information technology can have. It's life and death. We've got some questions coming in. They're good questions, and I'm going to come to them. But just before we do, I'm going to turn to Kim, a Dane living in Portugal, so a man with the ultimate European identity. Tell us about the EIB. That's a very large organization that does a lot of things. It's not the first organization you would think of when you think of impact investment and small-scale venture capital. Tell us what your role is and how you can make a difference.
Well, thank you very much, John, and I'd like to, of course, also thank the organizers for having me here, to Silvio Rodrigues and the diaspora, the Portuguese diaspora, but of course also to Jorge Portugal, who is here, and Cortec, for inviting me. Now, just very quick, because I have the deepest admiration for actually my fellow panelists, because they are in the forefront of impact financing and impact and impact doing. We are financing, but indeed EIB is more than what we're generally known to be, which is a very big volume financier. I mean, we are the biggest multilateral development bank in the world and all that. But the real issue is that we also are very active in Africa. And I'd like to share with you 2 entry points how we do this. First of all, impact financing has always been in our DNA, if you like, but we didn't call it that for a long time, because we have engineers and economists in-house. So whatever project we've done in all those years, I've been 29 years in EIB and in European Investment Fund, it has always been with an objective to have it technically, economically, and financially viable. And now we are, of course, oriented towards SDGs and climate change and so forth. So we are even more looking at this. Now, in Africa, just one figure, first of all, 3.3 billion euro was what we financed last year. All of that is really about SDGs and climate change, and we measure the impact we do when we finance. So this is our lending activity, but I'd like to drill down even more to 2 particular areas where we really are very impact-oriented. And we do 2 things. Either we finance and invest in venture capital, this is one area, and the other area is where we actually ourselves take the risk. Where we ourselves take the risk and use our, if you like, standard products plus equity and venture debt is when we finance neglected diseases research. So you're, of course, very well aware that there's a big issue of neglected diseases, meaning the diseases that are more prone in Africa and where there's not often the financial background to actually conduct the research. To pull this through, pharmaceutical companies may not have the full incentive. And so EIB has, since now some years, dedicated almost 300 million euro to financing clinical trials and medical device development in the really risky stages, where we sometimes even take the risk on the next phase of the clinical trial in order to see whether it makes happen. We in fact have in-house also biochemistries and chemicals and others, so specialists who can try to apprehend and measure the risk we're taking. This is an area which has been very, very successful. We have had 140 requests for financing. We've done so far 10 for about 200 million euro. And this is an initiative which is continuing and which is also aiming to develop more clinical trial capacity in Africa. So where most of it still is happening in Europe for neglected diseases, we are hoping to also see it moving to Africa. A second area is specifically oriented to venture capital. The European Investment Fund is the biggest venture capital investor in Europe. About 30%, almost 1/3 of the European venture capital market is actually funded by the European Investment Fund, something that is often not known. And is all about building ecosystems, but also making returns while investing. In Africa, we have an initiative, amongst others, called Boost. We have about 760 million euro equity dedicated to Africa. And this Boost initiative is to fund the venture capital funds and to help build ecosystems in Africa. We see that there are Africa funds and Africa teams. We see African startups. And we see also African co-investors. And so under this initiative, we invest in funds, in new teams, in African teams, with a clear priority there. And we try to crowd in private co-investors as well. This means it's all about crowding in private money. As we all know, SDGs without crowding in private money and co-investment will not work. And our way to do it is beyond selecting the right teams, and we can talk more if you like about that, how to do it, is also that we have a special novelty, if you like, is we have a 1/3 first loss piece that we invest in particularly important impact-oriented funds, where we take the first third of the losses of that fund, and thereby we, of course, help a lot private investors that may be interested in joining this asset class and taking the risk. So I stop there because I think my co-panelists have much more to say.
You're
but,
excited.
But this is a very important product, I think. And it's all about building venture capital ecosystems, as we call it. It's something we're doing here in Portugal, but it's something we also are doing in Africa more widely, and trying to attract investors to the asset class, to try to build the right teams and of course to support the startups. Ultimately, that's what it's about.
Okay, well, look, thank you. Those contributions are fascinating, and they raise a whole bunch of issues. But we've got some good questions coming in, and I'm going to start with one that I'm going to throw to Eric. Should not impact investors be more equipped with operational know-how and ability to transfer knowledge than a regular investment company?
Oh, well.
And I know that operational know-how is something you've thought about quite a bit. So tell us how that works with you guys.
Yes, I think it's a very good question, because it's also giving the opportunity to follow up on what my colleague co-panelists mentioned. Actually, one of the biggest problems that we've seen is that the financial institution systems has rules and structures. And when you compare it with the environment in Africa, it doesn't really add up, because organizations like EIB and others will pull money into the system, but the system has limit that was actually designed for the European ecosystem. And when you look in Africa, like 80 to 90% of the company are small companies. Now startup is becoming a big hype, etc., a big name, but it's smaller companies who cannot absorb big ticket. And the problem is that the financial structure have been not made to address the operational risk, so they somehow exclude the companies that are in need of small ticket, but will represent actually the majority of the market. And this is actually a very big issue. So what we did is that we realized that the way to invest in those companies and try to change and have an impact on the continent was to develop an investment model that will, instead of excluding those 80%, will had investment in a form of an operational support, so that we can actually have a better control of the investment, because that's also the risk that your investors are willing to take or not, and the appetite risk. And I think that for companies, often people, they ask me, when you have a company in Africa, what is one of the biggest challenge? And I also tell them that, you don't need to look very complicated. Try to imagine that you're a company in Africa and you're just trying to develop a technology. You need a technological partner. The technological partner is in Europe and in the US. You can always try to call him. He will never pick up the phone. And those are operational challenges. So this knowledge transfer is actually key for those 80% of the ecosystem. And that's why we have organized a structure of venture builder, where we'll basically finance those venture builders to work within the company and operate with those companies at that level, so that we can basically integrate very quickly this operational support early. And because it's operation support and it's people, first you can actually apply it to many companies, so you have a better allocations in terms of support, and you also have a better understanding of the challenge and the risk. And we do that at the beginning, at the stage where basically the classic investment will not allow any operations. And by doing that, it allows us basically to combine this operational support with smaller financing, because you have grant, you have now a lot of grant, you have a lot of zero interest loan, but when you are an organization and you have to make a 50,000 zero interest loan or a small investment like this, the probability that you're going to have a return is close to zero if you're not involved in the operations. And that's why I think that it's, even from an impact point of view, because all those companies today, which are those 80%, if they don't have this support, they will disappear. And all the effort that have been done before with the incubator, accelerator, etc., will also vanish. And that's why I think that the operational support is key, because with this operational support, you can actually planify and structure the return or the value created through those small tickets at the level of the companies. Before they move to the next stage, they can have access to the investment. And that's what we have integrate into our investment model, and that somehow allow us to have a more rich pipeline that we can actually tap into that group of companies that are somehow put a little bit aside.
Okay, so that's a very interesting point. You're not just really investing money, you're investing expertise, and that's what's really creating some of the impact. Does anybody else have a thought on that, Maria?
Well, I think we are twin souls because we realized that this is true. So what we're using our foundation for is for this operational support that we call technical assistance. So we develop a blended finance model, same as you. So these technical assistance, early stage losses are covered by the foundation, and whenever the company is ready, it will come to the fund to be invested. So I think this is very important, and I think your role is also there. You're already doing it in the tranches for early stage losses to build the industry, because they are very, very like startup countries, let's say, where everything is difficult. So yeah, blended finance is the solution. Yeah.
We call that also blended finance. So that's a term that is, being widely used as well. So the blended finance approach will be, as my colleagues just mentioned, really integrating, the equity or the debt part of the business, depending on the receiving, on the investee, and then this could be supported by a mechanism that will really help operationally the company to be developed, and the technical assistance is really one of them. In terms of also the investment, we also use some kind of subordinated guarantee that can be also help in fund for investor also to find them attractive for them to invest, but really helping companies inside your portfolio companies to be operationally supported, that really help them to grow to the next stage and become more of a growth investment rather than just keep at the entrepreneur level.
Okay, great. And we will turn to another question again from a contributor in the audience, about the rule of law, and a very important issue for investors, I guess. If you invest, can you be sure that the contract will be upheld, that there is rule of law on the ground? And the question is, rule of law is a key ingredient in decision making. Can any of you shed some light on how you assess this criteria, or do you take a subjective decision on the rule of law on the ground in different countries in deciding where to put your money? Anyone?
Well, I think that personally, I think that the biggest unknown ingredient in a company is actually the founder and the team, because of course we have different models, and what we've seen is that from country to countries, you often see the same problematic addressed with some differences, and it's usually the team and the people that will make the difference. I think that...
So it's more whether or not you can look the person in the eye and think this person's trustworthy than whether or not you might be able to pursue them with the police.
Well, we usually try to invest in founders who already have an expertise in the industry, because it's a journey of learning, and if the founder doesn't have this expertise, basically the investment will somehow be the learning process, and we try to reduce the learning curve. That's one. But I think that basically most investors are looking at four things. They're looking at the team, they're looking at the market, and obviously in Africa the market is there. They're looking at the technology, and that's a key element, because you have the technology and the cultural integration of the technology, and you have the executions. And the execution is basically what defines everything. And what we've seen often is that, the first fundraising for companies will be based on assumptions, and the second one will be actually confirmation of something that is real. So I think that the first investment is easier. The second one is actually the most complicated, where you have to have those 4 points validated, and you have no more excuses because you already had, everything on the table.
I want to say something.
Maria.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you. But what is very important for us, because we're doing social impact, so it's what is the entrepreneur wanting to change? What is what moves him? And I think that's what makes a difference. I believe in the team. Venture capital is always the same. Entrepreneur and team, that's very important. Projects are people. But what I'm so excited about is that when we talk about social investments, there is something else, and it's that the entrepreneur, like you, wanted to really make a change that is transcending themselves. It's not just for the money or the scale or everything. They really want to change something that moves them a lot. So they treat their customers as in the middle of the project, because that's what they want to change. They want to change their lives or make them better, or even the environment, wherever they take as an objective. It is very deep into them. So I think that's very important. What is the theory of change they have to start the business? And that, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to, there's a lot of interest in Vena's business, so I'm just going to pass on a couple of questions to her about it. One is, Vena, with patient history, can your platform predict and help prevent diseases? Second question, can you access data for patients based on their digital prints alone? Just tell us those two issues.
Okay. How to prevent disease with our platform. This is different step, because in order to make prevention, to predict disease, you need to have some data available, data that can be analyzed. But for the moment, the system is not there. We came from a background where everything were on paper. So the first foundation for us were to set up, as I said, a digital ecosystem for health, where hospitals, depending on the different location, are all connected to the same platform. That allows the patient, when he goes to this hospital, he have his medical record updated on our platform. He go to another hospital, even though he's not in the same city, he have the same medical record which is updated. So by building this foundation, which is digital, our vision is to make some analysis with those data, yes, anonymous, those data which can help the patient and the doctor to have some prediction on prevention for the patient, and then be able to provide a very precise health and personalized health for each patient. Because one of the problems which constitute a barrier for access to health for some African people is the assumption that when I go to hospital, I will have a lot of money to, a lot of health expenses, because I went to this hospital, my health record stayed there. I went to the other hospital, my health record stayed there. And when I will go to the hospital, they will start everything again. But by unifying the health institution, the patient can know that he has the same record that can be used by health workers, and they can work on existing data about him. And that helps the patient to break some barrier about health expenses, and he can easily, when he has a small issue in terms of health, he can go to hospital and don't mind about what he will have as expenses. So for the moment, we are not handling the analysis part, but we are getting there, because having those data is a huge resource that can help to predict and improve the system so that we can make prevention about a lot of disease and then decrease critically the health expenses. And the other thing is that by having those accurate data collected directly from hospital, because with the manual process, there is a lot of fake statistics which are made from the hospital, because you need to collect the information from the paper and introduce it into the computer. It's a very annoying work for some health workers, and they just put data which are not that accurate. But with the system that we are setting up, we can automatically collect the statistics that can be used at the national level by the health of ministry to make some statistics in terms of epidemic, in terms of some disease. And that are the resources that can be used to make like strategic investments in terms of some orientation in health sector. Okay. And that help as well to better manage the resources and help more the population at the ground.
Okay, so you've got a digital identity that is transferable. I've got a couple of more questions for Vena, but I don't want to turn this into the Vena show, fascinating though it is. So I would encourage people to talk more to her afterwards. Meanwhile, we'll deal with a couple of broader issues. I've got a couple of questions actually with people saying, you know, I want to know more about what impact investment is and how you measure it as opposed to other forms of investment. In a way, a version of the question I asked at the beginning. One question here, how do you measure impact? What are the metrics? Another question, give examples of impact investments. Are they like care medicals, or are they more staple topics like agriculture, social education? So really two questions, you know, what sectors, what examples, and also how do you distinguish between what is impact and what is just an investment? Anyone?
Well, yes.
Difficult question.
It's difficult and not at the same time. I mean, when we talk about investment in Africa in general, people say, well, by default, it is impact. But yes, there are ways that we can also measure it. We are facing impact investors, so not just commercial investors, but people that will rather have a social return and will forgo the commercial return. We do have foundation, not all of them, but some foundation or some social impact. They don't necessarily need a commercial return, but they need to see what the money has been, as opposed to just giving the money away. They want to see exactly how it has been done. So there are reports that company and funds. I'm working, for instance, at the moment with a private equity fund doing agriculture, and on a yearly basis, they do have a social reporting on what the investment has performed. So the job creation, but not exclusively, because that's a very easy way to calculate, but also how the company has performed through, I would say, a technical assistance that came into play as well, how it has performed, how it has evolved as well operationally, but also, there's so many various. We are very focusing on agriculture, but I'm sure my colleagues in education, I think it's a very easy way to measure in access to finance also. So. When you have an agribusiness or a farmer that has, his farm in Africa, but don't really have access to finance, there is a way that, we can also help them to access resources to perform. There's, so many different ways in social housing,
Okay, great. I think Kim had a point.
Yeah, I think Reggie, I think first of all, impact, and we've already heard it several times, and we fully agree, is about demonstrating that social impact investment is that you can have a lockstep. You can have both returns and impact. Now, impact is also about a change of mindset. What we see very much when we're discussing with social entrepreneurs, existing social entrepreneurs, for example, here in Portugal, we are actually also very much supporting social innovation and social entrepreneurship. And very often the social entrepreneurs, those that are in the social sector, are not able to actually quantify their impact themselves. So they are so busy just making their model run and looking for the funds for the next months, because often it's very short term, so that the whole mindset of actually thinking about what is actually the output. And this leads me to what I wanted to raise also was, social impact investment and financing is also about financing the output. So the focus is on what is actually the result and the social result. And as you probably know, there's a phenomenon now since some years which is called social impact bonds. Social impact bonds is where you do a financing and where, in fact, there's a new contract which is not input-based. Normally in social sector, it's all about input. How many euro per hour, how many hours, how many staff is thrown at a specific problem. But here we're talking more about what is the output. We have a new contract between the promoter of the social, so normally the state or insurance companies or others, who say, okay, you promise to deliver a certain output, a social output, and we will give you a premium, we'll give you a bonus if you reach that output. And so that is also about impact investment, social impact bonds, and actually paying for an output, because that generates new innovation if you start thinking more about output-based financing.
Okay. We've got two more questions which relate to each other, and in fact they relate to this question as well. They're about how impact investment coexists with other forms of investment and grant aid and so forth. One question is, how does impact investment conflict or work with the private VC industry? Does backing loss leaders deter private venture capital? Another question is, how does private impact investment operate next to government grants and aid? Do they coexist or cooperate? Anyone? Just VC, aid, different forms of money infusion? Eric?
I think that to answer that question, I just want to underline an anecdote. I spent one day recently with one impact investor, entrepreneur, and we were talking about impact, and and I really see that there's different perspective. When we are here and we're talking about metrics, measure, etc., like was mentioned, for him, he was just saying that, okay, you're talking about every impact, but everything that you're talking about is my life. So for him, impact is actually his life. And what he was asking is saying that, okay, how can I make that my life continues and improves? And I think that the connections between the investor and the impact is that it's at that point where the entrepreneur will give the drive, the directions, the good basis, and then the investor, the private equity person will say, okay, what are the instrument and structure we're going to build so that you can continue your drive and keep that trajectory, and those metrics will be the point.
That individual or people like them, would they prefer to be given money as aid that they'd never have to repay, or did they prefer a relationship, an investment relationship?
Actually, it changed. Before, I think that before in Africa, you've seen a lot of people saying that they want to have giving money. But as of today, there is a new kind of entrepreneur, new kind of impact entrepreneur. There's more, when we talk about the diaspora, there's a lot of people coming back in Africa with a certain knowledge, etc. And now they want to own their own business. So they want to leverage on that first money to build a strong system, because it gives them some one step further, and then become really an investment of a process, because that's actually their independency. And that thing that in terms of impact, the biggest impact for an entrepreneur is actually to earn his independency financially.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that what happened before is that they only know grants, so that's the way they develop their businesses. But whenever they become more and more interested, and they know there are other tools, they really want to use both. And have you taken the risk together with them, not just giving the money and forget about it, but just a long-term relationship. Slowly, but it's happening. Yeah, I agree with you.
There's an interesting related question to this. Should civil society stakeholders, for example, NGOs and campaign organizations, try to create an impact investment environment among immigrants when it comes to remittances? So instead of thinking about remittances for aid and financial support, thinking about remittances as a form of investment, which I guess would build on something that Eric is saying. Kim?
Well, I mean, I think indeed we're seeing more and more foundations, philanthropics, NGOs, who in fact can use what I just mentioned before, which is this output-based financing. So you may not need to go all the way and become a venture capitalist, but you can go halfway and start contracting more the output that you're looking for and giving an upside for the output.
And also, I mean, I think it's compatible. I mean, like we start with a venture capital approach and we create foundations because we also realize that it's also tools for them to make one step further. So I think that the target of collaboration should basically be discussed, and all the metrics for the non-profit and the profit can be aligned at some point if there is a good communication.
Yeah,
Okay.
we still need philanthropy, which is like now being questioned, because if the model was so wrong, let's do investments all around. So yeah, this blended finance, we call it a hybrid model, is badly needed. And foundations that are doing venture philanthropy are now realizing that donors want to do the investment, not the unrestricted funding, and this is causing problems, so we are all needed. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting end note that, you know, for the individual, we have these categories in our mind about aid, VC, angel funding, but for the individual on the ground, they're often thinking about building their life and their business for their family, and those categories don't mean quite the same things. Well, look, thank you very much indeed. We've had an inspiring example of African entrepreneurship. We've had a lot of interesting questions about what investment really means, what it's doing on the ground, and I think we've seen that a lot is happening. So I'd like to thank our panel.
Sure.
Congratulations.
Can't quit. They need to continue talking. So I think we all need coffee. We're gonna do a short break, or shorts, I mean, a good networking break. Please use the opportunity to talk to the people that you did manage to talk to yesterday, make your connections, take out your business cards, and obviously use the opportunity now that you have those panelists, the ones that had more questions for Vina, just, corner her somewhere out in the plaza. 11:10 sharp, and this time there are no alterations of the timing. 11:10, we meet again here in the auditorium for the panel on, I can say, the hospitality industry, on tourism and the incredible opportunities that there are in Africa and the cooperation with Europe in that field. So, see you here 11:10 in 50 minutes, more or less. It's 11:08 and people are already running into the auditorium. I like this. We can go straight to growth and rehabilitating the heritage, culture and tourism. Let's start with the introduction video.
A nation's heritage is a force for generating tourism, a development tool for economic restructuring, to unfold new, appealing and safe destinations, and know more about local culture, history, arts, traditions and lifestyles. A broad market with many niche markets. But heritage tourism innovation demands cooperation. Different actors, municipalities and entrepreneurs to create positive economic and development outcomes. Europe and Africa, a common heritage to explore.
So let's welcome the panelists. Ana Mendes Godinho, the Portugal Secretary of State of Tourism, and Mossadegh Bali, founder and CEO of the Azalai Hotels Group in Mali. Now, the moderator will be Jonathan Rosenthal. He is the Africa editor of The Economist, United Kingdom.
Brilliant.
I'll leave the floor to you. Just a reminder, you saw how well it went in the first panel of this morning with the questions coming in from the audience. Please use the opportunity and throw some questions at Jonathan that will then use them in the discussion.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I can't tell you how excited I am to be involved in this, and it's for a number of reasons. The one is just that, as an African, when I first started traveling to Europe, you sort of arrive in Paris or London, and you just see this kind of Lisbon, this wealth of kind of cultural heritage and the way in which it's been used to drive growth and drive economic development. And I sort of have gone back to both my home in South Africa and also other parts of Africa, and I just sort of think this is an opportunity that we really should be talking about. So I'm thrilled to be talking about the subject. I'm also very pleased to see that there is a lot of interest in the audience. I was a little bit worried that given this topic or the surf school breakout outside, I sort of thought we might not manage to get so many people here. And I'm seeing some. Nobody told you about the surf school. Oh, I'm very sorry, but the registration for that is closed, so you're going to talk about culture with us. But let's just start. I mean, Anna, why don't we just start at a very high level, and let's just, before we begin, scope some of the opportunity, both as you've seen it here, but also as you look at African countries.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Portugal, to all of you. I hope that we will have the time to surf together afterwards, but till then, let's see what we can do together, namely looking at Africa and the opportunities we have to develop some projects together. I think that looking at Portugal, you can see an example of a country that arriving late into tourism was a great advantage, and I think Africa is the same. Africa is arriving late to tourism like Portugal, and this has a huge advantage because we learn from the mistakes of others and we take advantages of the trends of the future. And the trends of the future are people want to feel that they are involved in local communities. They want to feel that they discover new places, authentic places, not fake places. They want to discover unique landscapes. They want to be in places where they feel they are the only ones that can have that experience. That happened in Portugal. Portugal was in the right place at the right time to benefit from, of course, some international tendencies. But what we felt is that people were kind of fed up of seeing the same things. And so they wanted to discover new things, and Portugal was in the right place for this, of course, with huge investment from the private and the public sector, with new hospitality facilities, new experiences around heritage, new experiences about natural landscapes. And this put us in a place that made us grow in 3 years 45% in terms of revenue. Results, huge creation of employment. In the last 3 years, 1 out of the 3 new jobs created in Portugal were created by tourism. And at the same time, tourism was this instrument to develop lots of other activities, becoming like an engine of the economy. Right now it represents in Portugal 18% of all our exports, 13.7% of our GDP, and 10% of our employment force. So I do think that it is a very powerful instrument to change countries and to foster other activities, namely agriculture, commerce, even innovation and tech activities. Because what's happening in Portugal, and tourism has been an instrument, a crucial instrument for this, it's that it is a visit card, not only to attract visitors, but mainly to attract new investors, new inhabitants, new students, new people who want to come to Portugal, for example, to work here. Because tourism has created this environment where people feel comfortable. Also, we addressed a huge effort to create air capacity, which is crucial. Not only for tourism, for business, for all the activities. So when you tackle tourism, you are tackling crucial areas to attract investment, new people, create jobs, etc. So this is a powerful tool. Of course, if you drive it into, for example, using heritage and putting heritage back into life through tourism, this is also a way to use your natural and cultural resources to put them transform it into economic activities.
And let's hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to heritage. But Mossadegh, let's just talk, again, I suppose you've approached this from the other side as an entrepreneur and a business person who's been investing in the sector. I mean, again, the sort of view from 30,000 feet, just about scoping the opportunity and where you see the situation now.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference. Tourism today is the #1 industry, driving close to more than 10% of global GDP, creating a lot of jobs in the countries, as the secretary said. And Africa is just coming. We attract barely 70 million tourists a year. I think that's less than what is going to France, which is 80 million, and Spain 70 million. So we have a big industry which can create a lot of jobs on the continent, and we do know that today the #1 problem for the African continent is to create enough jobs to keep the youth on the continent. Unfortunately, we see what's going on in Libya 2 days ago, where immigrants were killed, and also 80 immigrants died in the Mediterranean Sea. So all these immigrants, they leave the continent because of lack of jobs on the continent. So definitely tourism is today one of I would say, the biggest industry where we can create a lot of jobs. We as entrepreneurs, as Alai Hotels Group, we started 25 years ago in Mali. We bought a state-owned hotel, Grand Hotel de Bamako, which was built in 1952 by the French. So we bought it, and with a loan we got from IFC, we refurbished the hotel, and we then built a second hotel, and then we went to Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, where we bought a hotel in Guinea-Bissau, which used to be the Portuguese camp for the officers, Hotel 24 September. Today we have 10 hotels in 6 West African countries, and we are building 4 more hotels in Senegal, Guinea-Conakry, Niger, and Cameroon. So definitely there is a huge opportunity on the tourism sector. We are in the business segment. We cater mainly for business travelers, but also leisure is big. Some countries like Morocco, Kenya, South Africa are really investing on the heritage, as you said. A city like Marrakesh is attracting a lot of tourists because Marrakesh developed a strategy on heritage. And therefore, it's a city which is attracting a lot of tourists. So definitely, with 70 million tourists coming to Africa, we really can create a lot of jobs, a lot more jobs. But that, we need investment. I saw that some DFIs are here. The European Investment Bank is here. This is what we need. We need a lot of investment. We need FDI, we need African investment, we need to invest on also skills. Our group, we had to start a school in Bamako, a hospitality school, because unfortunately the governments in West Africa did not invest in skill development. So we, with our own financial means, we are investing in a hospitality school. So we need investment in skills, we need, as she said, we need air capacity. We have a new treaty in Africa now which opens up the sky. So we have to implement that treaty now so that we can open the sky. For me as a traveler, sometimes it's easier and cheaper to fly from, let's say, Abidjan to Lisbon with TAP Portugal than to fly from Abidjan to Dakar. It costs more to fly Abidjan-Dakar than to fly Abidjan-Lisbon. So these are the things we need to fix if we want to attract more tourists on the continent, if we want to develop our capacity and put forward our heritage, our culture. Also the visa policy, which is also a strain for tourism. As an African, there are many countries on the continent where I need a visa as a Malian. So we really need to have a visa-free Africa, at least for Africans and also for international travelers, if we want to really... I would remind you that every year we have 1.2 billion tourists traveling, and we are attracting only 70 million.
Yeah. Again, hold the thoughts, because I'm going to come back to air travel and visas. But let's just bring in this idea of kind of heritage and culture as a tourism draw, because I think certainly in East Africa and South Africa in the past, I think we were quite lazy. We said, come and look at our elephants. And yet you come from a country with a long and deep history and an ancient civilization. I just wonder to what extent you are able to use that as a draw card.
Oh, definitely we should use our heritage, our culture. As I said, Marrakesh is doing well, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt also is doing well with the pyramids. Mali has a very bright, a very ancient civilization in cities like Timbuktu, Djenné, Dogon country. Unfortunately, in Mali today, we have all these security concerns. Before we had these terrorist groups settling in the northern part of Mali, Timbuktu used to be a tourist spot. And many investors were transforming private houses into guest houses. So we saw a development in tourism, in handicrafts in Timbuktu. Unfortunately, all that stopped when the terrorist groups came from Algeria and settled in the northern part of Mali. But any and every African country has a culture, has a heritage to develop and to foster. And definitely we have a lot to offer to international travelers. And what Portugal is doing, Portugal can share it with all the African countries, how to develop leisure tourism, intellectual tourism, historical tourism. For example, I see people when I tell them that I am from Timbuktu, and they tell me, well, my dream, the dream of my life is to go to Timbuktu and have a Timbuktu stamp on my passport.
Yeah. But so, and I'm going to come back to you in a minute on sort of lessons and kind of sharing knowledge about things that the state can be doing. But let's just talk about security. You raised it, and I see that's come up in some of the questions from the audience, and thank you for the questions that are coming in. But a question that I often face when I look at countries and look at tourism is the question of whether, in some ways, all of this talk is creating a kind of dangerous pro-cyclicality. So we're saying, unemployment is a problem, instability is a problem, tourism can solve that problem, but it takes one attack, as we saw in Tunisia, and the tourists disappear for 3 years or 5 years. How does one deal with that issue?
Well, unfortunately, I think Africa is not treated as it should be treated when these things happen. When you have a terrorist attack in Paris, you have 120 dead. No government says, don't go to Paris. When you have an attack on the Radisson Bamako, which we had a couple of years ago, you have 20 people dead. Almost all the world governments say, don't go to Bamako, don't go to Mali. So this is an treatment, because today security problem is everywhere. You can be in a metro, on an airplane, having a coffee somewhere in Paris, and you get bombed, unfortunately. So this is a world problem. It's not an African problem. But the way it's treated in the media, as far as Africa is concerned, for me, is not fair. And of course, that will stop investment in tourism on the continent if we put forward this security problem. So unfortunately, we as Africans, we don't tell the narrative, our own narrative. It's the international media like CNN, France 24, BBC, which tells our own narrative. And unfortunately, quite often, it's a negative narrative. A lot of good things are going on the continent, but they are not put forward. Yeah, we have security problem. In my own country, we do have security problem in the northern part of the country, but people are still coming to Bamako to take care of their business. Egypt went through a lot of problems, but tourists are coming back. But it takes time. So for me, as an African, as an investor who invested close to $200 million in hospitality infrastructure, I think we should change the glasses, the way we see these problems on the African continent. And we as Africans also should maybe, I don't know how, but we should also maybe take control of our own narrative and tell the good stories which are going on the continent. Yes, there are bad stories also, but...
So I think we're all optimists up here, and I imagine everyone there is, or most people there are optimists. So let's enough of the bad narrative. Let's look at some of the good stuff. And you've gone through a process of saying how does one tap into the sort of assets, tangible and intangible, and I sort of wonder what lessons you think can be drawn.
Well, one of the things we've been doing is to create a good environment for investors to come to Portugal through instruments to find loans, etc., to attract investors, to make it easier to invest in Portugal, but also at the same time to create a good environment to invest in heritage. For this, what we decided to do was to put culture and tourism working together, and also the finance ministry, which is also always crucial, to work together and look at the heritage we had that was not being used for decades, that could be a very important asset to put in the market to develop as a touristic product. It was a very tough process. We started this 2 years and a half ago. It was very tough. First, a mentality problem. We had to change and focus mentalities to create this program where we identified 33 public monuments, heritage monuments, and we decided, well, let's ask the private sector to develop projects here through a concession model and through concrete parameters of intervention. This was an amazing, I would say now, program. In the end, we were almost giving up because it was too tough. You can imagine most of these buildings are not even identified in the register. Some of them have several owners even inside the state. And now it's fantastic to look back and see it was good we didn't give up. We have most of these buildings already being renovated by the private sector. We have 500 investors looking at the program and going to the trying to get the buildings, and it has been so successful. We've already opened the first hotel, which is in the interior of Portugal, and we had this concern to guarantee that this program was also a way to create anchors in the interior of Portugal, to create attractiveness in places where we don't have other types of offer. And the first hotel has already opened last month in Elvas, which is in the interior of Portugal. It was a conversion of an old convent that was transformed into a hotel by a group. And now we've been, many countries are looking at this as a case study, and we are exporting the model. We are already doing it with Cabo Verde, Mozambique, Angola, and São Tomé. Again, as you said, they have many Portuguese old buildings. That are not being used. And so we decided that this was also a way we could do to use tourism as a cooperation instrument. We are doing we are acting in 3 areas with these countries. First, to train people, young people in tourism in these countries. We are doing it, bringing some students here, but doing also training sessions in these countries. We are also planning in creating a net of tourism schools in these countries. Again, to export the expertise we have in training that has been so successful. We are helping in implementing this program Revive. We called it Revive because we are giving back life to these heritage buildings, not only in Portugal, but now in several countries. And Morocco is also entering this program. And we are training these teams. We had teams from these countries coming last month to Portugal, exactly to create, implement the model in these countries. And we are at the same time creating specific financial instruments to support the development of this Revive program in these countries. So I do think this is a case study of cooperation. Looking at what we have in common, taking the best of each country to develop this program. For example, in São Tomé, we're doing it with the roças, the traditional farms of coffee plantation, cacao plantation in São Tomé. And we are using it also as an instrument to attract international investors to this program. Again, if we have a net of 500 international investors that are looking to the Portuguese Revive, I'm sure that they will be the natural also investors to go to this Revive program in these countries that are coming into the program. It was not easy, but it was incredible to see that something that looked impossible, now everyone wants to do it because it's working.
Yes.
As I said, we bought 24 September in Guinea-Bissau. It's one of our best hotels because it's on 5 acres, and it used to be the Portuguese Army officers' compound. So definitely this is a program which we can develop. We have, for example, all these old railway stations in all our countries which are abandoned now. So we can transform these railway stations into, let's say, 5-star hotels. One country which is doing quite well also in this heritage tourism is Tunisia. Tunisia used to have a large Jewish community which left the country. So they developed coming back for Jewish community to visit a very old synagogue which is in Tunisia, and it's doing quite well. And actually, during the very difficult period where tourists were not going to Tunisia anymore because of the terrorist attacks, these Jewish community were coming back to visit these old synagogues, and it really helped many hotels survive. So definitely what Portugal is developing in this heritage tourism, transforming all the houses into nice hotels, putting forward our culture, our heritage, can definitely help the continent develop its tourism sector. And one last thing, definitely we see a lot of investment going into infrastructure. PE firms are investing a lot. Big companies, international brands are investing a lot on the continent. But what I see as an entrepreneur is a lack in skills development investment. And definitely this is what we need. And I think Portugal can help a lot on developing skills on the continent.
So, we've all been to conferences that are just talk shops, and everyone kind of says the same old stuff, and nothing ever happens. So let's make this action-oriented. And we've got 2 people here who can do stuff. And I'm going to ask you to say you've got an official from a government that is active. What would you tell Anna to do when she goes back to the office on Monday?
I will do this, Anna. I want Portugal to help us develop our hospitality school in West Africa.
But the priorities. Everyone's got a long to-do list. So what are the 1 or 2 priorities that you think, kind of Portugal and Anna should be doing in this space? I mean, you've heard what she is doing. What should she be doing more of or different?
For me, Portugal first is doing a good job in air links. TAP Portugal is flying to now many capital cities on the continent. They used to go to Bamako. They stopped. I don't know why they stopped, but they should come back. I even have a loyalty card, TAP Portugal, because they used to come to Bamako. So that definitely is, because as I said, the way for us to get more tourists is to have air links, very good air links, and at a cheaper price. Once we have that, and good visa system, I think we can double, triple the 70 million we are getting now. And as I said, what Portugal also can do is to invest in skills. This is what we lack. I can tell you, whenever we have to open a new hotel, our biggest challenge is to find trained people. So what we do, we hire our GM 1 year before we open. We hire our middle management 8 months before we open, and we hire the staff 6 months before we open. It's a cost for us. It's a huge cost. But we don't have a choice, because if you open a hotel here in Lisbon, you go to hospitality schools and you hire people maybe 2-3 months before you open. In Africa, you have to do it 1 year
Grow your
before
talent, yeah.
because you have to train them.
Yeah.
So definitely, we need to invest a lot in skills development because capital is coming, but skills, it takes time to develop skills. Yeah.
Okay. And Anna, you've now got some things on your to-do list. When you're speaking to entrepreneurs and people in the industry in Africa, what do you want from them? What should they be doing or telling their governments or co-entrepreneurs?
Crucial, I agree, air connections. Just to give you an example, in the last 3 years in Portugal, we got 500, and I'm always counting, 584 new routes and air operations, and this made a difference. Of course, it helped us connect to all the countries, all the continents, namely, just an example, a small example. In 2 years, we had 2 years ago 500,000 Americans coming to Portugal. Now we have over 1 million. 2 years, and the success, air connection. Of course, then at the same time, promotion, etc. But air connection, visa issues, crucial. Again, what we've been doing is simplifying also the visa procedures, namely from non-EU citizens. As you know, we have going on agreement that is being negotiating in terms of the Portuguese-speaking countries in terms of visa, which will be also crucial for all of us. From you, I would ask, please, trust in our Revive and invest in this project. I do think it is a winning project. And my compromise, and we are doing this, is the development of a net of schools, of tourism schools in the African countries. We are starting it. We've started with some concrete actions. But we are upgrading it into permanent schools in the African countries, because I do think this is a know-how that we already have. So it's easier for us to expand. So my compromise with you, I will do it.
So as the moderator, and we're out of time, so I'm going to keep this very short. My job is to ask questions, not tell stories. But on the visa thing, I just have to. There's a famous story among journalists who cover Nigeria, and I know there's some Nigerians in the room. It's very difficult to get a visa as a journalist to go in. And a few years ago, a Western journalist thought, well, I'll just apply for a tourist visa. And he got the visa, and he arrived at the airport in Lagos, and he arrived before the Nigerian border official, and the man looked at this, he said, "What are you here for?" And the man said, I'm a tourist. And the border official said, "We have no tourists here." Denied. So I agree with you. They've got to sort out the visas. I am going to ask you to please join me in thanking our guests. So this was a really informative discussion, so thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring. I think we all can see the immense opportunities in the hospitality sector in Africa. I was just sitting next to the Portuguese ambassador in Maputo at lunch yesterday, and she just said, "Thora, you need to remember that we have a distorted map. Just Mozambique has 3,000 kilometers of beaches. Beautiful beaches. I mean, there is just so much potential that there is in this sector." Now, I want to, before we open up for our special guest, I want to show you a video, because we are human beings. We take things, I work in TV. I know how effective it can be. We want to show just a 5-minute video on Revive, the project that Anna was talking about, just for you to get a better understanding and view of how it works. Anna is clever. You know, I was waiting for the pictures of the renovated buildings, but no, these 30 buildings are waiting for people to come and make an offer. The government will make a concession for some decades. You cannot buy it as your house, but for an official use, hotels or something like that, I could feel the urge to go and renovate some of those beautiful buildings. So just so you know, this is what she left us with. Look at what's out there that can be done. Now, it's time for our special guest. He is Portuguese, and he's the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
It is a pleasure to greet the Eurafrican Forum, focused on the power of diasporas to connect people and advance prosperity. The United Nations continues to deepen partnerships with Africa. We are working together to advance the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Africa's Agenda 2063 to combat climate change and to promote peace and development. With dynamic economies and the world's fastest growing youth population, Africa is poised to become a leading continent for investment and innovation. And I'm pleased that your forum is highlighting those opportunities and building new partnerships. I welcome your emphasis on the contributions of migrants. When undertaken as a choice and managed appropriately, migration significantly benefits both countries of origin and destination. Thank you for your efforts to help transform the shared future of Europe and Africa, and please accept my best wishes for a successful forum.
Short and sharp from the Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, we are coming close to the end of the forum this year, and I'm going to invite our specialist in final conclusions, our chairman, Mr. Barroso.
Thank you. We are coming to the end of this very inspiring sessions of this second Eurafrican Forum. I just want to recall that we had the honor of having yesterday with us the President of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, the President of Mozambique, Filipe Nyusi, but we also had here the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Portugal, Santos Silva, now through a video message, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. We also had the Director General of the International Organization of Migration, Antonio Vitorino. We had the former President of the Republic, and in fact the first honorary President of this Conselho de Diaspora, Professor Cavaco Silva. He joined us for lunch yesterday. And just now we heard also in a panel the State Secretary for Tourism from Portugal, Mrs. Ana Mendes Godinho. But for me, what was very interesting about this meeting today and yesterday was the blend of people. As one of the participants in one of the panels said, she usually is not invited for these kind of platforms. We not only had people from the governments, officials, and from international organizations. By the way, we also had a Director General from the European Commission and a Director for the European Investment Bank. Not only we had these officials, but we had people from NGOs, from startups. We have real entrepreneurs. We have people from business, people from the philanthropic field. We had people from the civil society. We have people from culture and the arts. We had many women, including panel women only. We had young people from several generations. And I think this is what makes this kind of event special. Our idea is to put people together. The idea is the network, like the network for the diaspora. And I can confirm to you that during this meeting, we have received the confirmation that at least 2 African countries are going to create diasporas, councils like the one we have here in Portugal. Because we believe this is a way of having what we can call soft power. Not only have the traditional diplomacy, not only have the governments, but also have these networks of people that by nature are very global and international minded. Of course, they love their countries, but they are open to others. And I think this idea of putting together these different diasporas, the Portuguese diaspora, but Africa diasporas or others, is indeed one that it is important. Because it can build on this diversity and it can build on the connection between people. Today, we had, but I'm not going to summarize, we just heard them, so it will be, I think, useless for me to repeat. But we had two very interesting panels, one on Africa as a new frontier for impact investment and innovation. And I really believe that if there is a sector that is growing now in the financial world, is this sector of investments with some social or even green characteristics. There is a growing market for everything that has to do with ESG, so environment, social and governance issues. And I personally believe that Africa can be a natural partner for this. Because when European or, let's say, Western companies try to show their commitment also to these values, and today this is a matter of survival for these companies. I think that any, let's say, forward-looking, enlightened entrepreneur, at least the biggest corporations today in the world, they have a program for ESG. And that opens a lot of opportunities for Africa, because in Africa we can hopefully see more quickly the impact of these investments that are socially or environmental or in terms of responsible governance oriented. So everything that has to do with social bonds, with green bonds, with these social impact bonds, I think there is, besides the philanthropic nature of it, there is here a market that is growing. And I think that's an area where we should invest more, because as many of the participants in our panels today and yesterday mentioned, Africa needs investment. Africa needs investment, and there is here a great set of opportunities for financial innovation. Some of these issues are quite technical, quite difficult, but because we know that sometimes there are a lot of barriers, including in some corporations in Europe and the United States, in terms of compliance. So we have to find new ways of being able to attract investment, long-term investment, to Africa, and I think today we have discussed here some interesting options. Then we had also an interesting panel about heritage, culture, and tourism. And in fact, tourism is precisely one of those areas where we can put together two kinds of experience of know-hows that are very different. One is business, I mean just management, how to organize, let's say, the growth of our economy for employment through investment in what is a very important sector of our economies. And our state secretary has shown how important tourism is for Portuguese economy. It's really a great success story, the story of Portuguese tourism. She also highlighted, and that was interesting, that Portugal and Africa can be latecomers to this tourism, let's say, renaissance, and this is also an opportunity for Africa and also for joint ventures between Europe and Africa. I believe Africa also has a great potential in terms of tourism. There are some issues to be settled. In fact, the security issue is an issue, but we saw that there is a great potential in this sector. But tourism is not just an economic activity in the traditional sense. It's also about culture. It's also about arts. It's also about creativity. So I think we are here touching also the borders of a new economy where we need to put more resources and also more new thinking. At least I also believe it was important to see that here we have given up on the idea of Afro-pessimism. On the contrary, I saw positive messages about opportunities that exist in this sector of tourism, heritage, I mean, everything that is linked with the so-called hospitality. And I like the word hospitality, because in fact today we are seeing namely about the migrants, as we have discussed yesterday, about foreigners. There is, in fact, a broad cultural struggle going on. Hospitality or hostility? Do we see the foreigners as an enemy, the hostes, as we said in Latin, or do we see a foreigner as a friend? Can we or not be more inclusive? This was, in fact, a topic all over our sessions about the issue of equals, partnership of equals and sharing values. So the basic attitude, the basic broad cultural attitude we have towards others, is it an attitude of hospitality and inclusion or an attitude of rejection and hostility? I think we are here and we have reaffirmed once again the values of hospitality and inclusion. I think these sessions have shown a lot of goodwill, a lot of passion, and I would like to underline this word passion. For some of us, the issue of Africa is a matter of passion. If I may make a personal remark, I discovered this issue when I was 31 years old. I was invited to join the government, precisely in charge of development cooperation, foreign affairs and development cooperation. The prime minister then, it was President Cavaco Silva that you met yesterday, invited me, and I was quite surprised because I told him, but I have never been in Africa in my life. Why are you asking me to deal with Angola, Mozambique, and so on? And he says, precisely because we have never been there. Because I want someone who has no prejudice against Africa, does not look at Africa through the, let's say, the lens of colonialism or also anti-colonialism. You go there with a fresh mind. And afterwards, I was so excited to discover Africa, namely when I was the mediator for the peace, namely in Angola, the terrible war that was going on, and the peace cess agreements that were made not far from here where we are today, and also our support to Mozambique and other processes. So I think many of us, when in Europe, when we speak about Africa, we speak with some passion. I love Africa. I fell in love with Africa. The creativity of the people, the resilience of the people, the courage, the great humor we find in Africans. So I think Africa is indeed something that has a potential still to explore, and part of us is motivated to Africa by this passion. But let's be also frank and honest. In terms of the economy, there are, besides passion, there are also the interests. And Africa has a very dynamic demographics. Africa will be one of the biggest markets in the world. Yesterday, I gave you the figures about the relationship between Europe and Africa. It's extremely important, but I think it will be much more important in the future. In fact, when you look today at Asia, we see that many of those economies are coming to what we call the level of maturity. Yes, they are going to continue to grow, but their potential growth is not so big as it was, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago. I mean, it's very unlikely that China will come back to growth of 2 digits. So they are going to continue to grow, but not at the same pace. Africa has a potential to grow at 2 digits. The market of Africa is going to be one of the most important markets in the world. So I think in this issue, we can at the same time have the passion for those who want to share that passion, but also to try to align with our interests, the long-term interests, and make them compatible in terms of the European interests that exist, but also basically the interest of development and growth and jobs for Africa. And one point when I saw that was coming in almost all panels, just now in the panel of tourism, is the issue of education. Education and skills. It was said by some of the entrepreneurs, what we need more is skills. And so if there is I think we should highlight and be critically important is what can we do together, Africa and Europe, in terms of education and skills. And in Europe, we have a lot of know-how in many of these areas. We can share this know-how. I mean, some people, in fact, people that will be happy to do it, I would say almost for free, because we can share this, and we can, at the same time that we are fulfilling ourselves, we are also helping others. So the issue of education and skills, and what Europe can bring in terms of support the ideas of Africans and the dynamism of Africans is really important. And I have been in more than 30 countries in Africa. And that's why I do not share the pessimism that I see very often. If you want to see, for instance, what is dynamism, you go to one of those small markets in Western Africa, for instance. What they lack very often is this dimension, this critical mass. But they have, in Africa, they have the resources, the characteristics to be very successful economies. And I think that Europe will also benefit from being partners in equal terms with Africa. I have now to conclude with some words of thanks, because as you know, to organize such an event, it requires a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of time. I like to say on behalf of the conference and also on behalf of the Conseil de Diaspora, to say my very sincere thanks to Cascais municipality, Município de Cascais. It was represented here as well by the the mayor and the vice mayor, to Nova SB, presented here by the director, Daniel Tassa. This is probably the most beautiful campus in the world, I think. I don't know how these students can work when they have the temptation of surf all the time. But it's not only a great campus, it's one of the best business schools in Portugal and in the world, in fact, if you look at the rankings of the business schools. So it's, we are very proud and very happy that now we can organize this event here in Nova SBE. I'd like to thank all the sponsors. There are so many, from Turismo de Portugal to public and private entities that I cannot now detail them, but my very warm words of thanks to them. Once again, a word of thanks to our honorary president, is the President of the Republic, and our vice honorary president is the Foreign Minister of Portugal. And now it's true that we are a partnership of equals, but let's be frank, we are all equals, but not everybody has worked the same. Some have worked much more to make this possible. That's why I want to say my very sincere muito obrigado to Philippe Botton, the director of the Conselho da Diaspora. Without him and his enthusiasm, that will not be possible. To Silvia Rodrigues, where she is. She's somewhere. Oh, no, she's there. Silvia, can you stand up a moment? She was organizing everything. To Silvia and her team, all the young team, from the hostesses to the interpreters to the producer, all this team that organized, I would like to say to them a very, very big obrigado. And of course, to all of you that came and to were sharing your experiences. Because at the end, this is about people. This is about people. This is not just about the governments or about the structures or about the systems, about people. Very often, when I go all over the world now in my, let's say, different, let's say, capacities, I make conferences, and very often, namely young people, they ask me, and what's going to happen? What's going to happen to globalization? What's going to happen to trade? What is going to happen to this and that? And my answer is almost always the same. It depends. It depends. It depends on you. So nothing is written in advance. It depends on what we do. And even if it's a small contribution, I think we can make a difference. And I think during these 2 days here, we have made a difference in this beautiful place of Cascais, in this beautiful country that is Portugal. Yes, I'm against nationalism, but I'm a little bit patriotic. And you know, we made that difference, that it was a great French writer who said, patriotism is to love what belongs to us. Nationalism is to hate what belongs to others. I think we can be, and we have seen during 2 days at the same time that we can be patriotic, we can love our community of reference, but at the same time we have to show our interest and commitment to the rest of mankind, to others, be it in Europe, to be in Africa, and I think naturally Europe and Africa can be very good, equal, and respectful partners. I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you next year here in Cascais, in Portugal. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barroso. Now, even though these were the final conclusions, don't leave quite yet, because we started with a boom. And so we have to exit with a boom as well. I so agree with what Mr. Barroso was saying about being patriotic. I love my country. I'm very proud of it. I will, wave my flag anytime, especially in the soccer field. I've tried to explain to people that come from big nations that when you come from a small nation and your soccer team, your football team, gets not only to the European Cup and wins England, but also goes to the World Cup in Russia and, just won one with Argentina. That was, there's no way of explaining how you feel after that. And I think because we were talking about building on heritage, thank God mass tourism didn't come to Iceland earlier. It started in the 21st century because we weren't ready. It would have ruined the country. It would have ruined the volatile nature. So actually what Anna was talking about in Portugal, the latecomers actually can benefit from the mistakes of others, and I think that will be the case in Africa, how they use their heritage, but protect it at the same time. So that was just my 2 cents. I'm really inspired from those 2 days, which I hope that you have enjoyed. And please use the app both to connect with people, but also to give us feedback. I was here last year. Now this forum has gone up a level, and obviously the ambition is to take it up another level next year. And we need your feedback. What was good, what was less good. All fair criticism is so welcome. But we will end with a little farewell video and maybe some dancing.
Inclusive innovation, impact investment, new partnerships, sustainable jobs, migration opportunities, heritage. Let's face these challenges to achieve more, to make a real change in the world. Together, we can be stronger. Africa and Europe in a partnership of equals. See you in 2020. Thank you all.
That was it. We're done. The second edition of the Eurafrican Forum is hereby closed. Thank you so much for your time here. Hope to see you in 2020.